As a general of the Empire, an S-class alpha, Marco hated Omegas more than anything. He despised anything that might make him lose control, which is why he chose me, a normal beta. Until one day, I overheard him telling his lieutenant, "Giving up your career for an Omega? That's foolish. A soldier should have no weaknesses." His lieutenant asked, "What if your sister-in-law becomes pregnant?" Marco was silent for a moment, then said, "He's a beta. He never will, and shouldn't, have children." I clutched the pregnancy report showing a secondary differentiation into Omega and suddenly realized that, maybe, it was time for me to leave. When Marco dragged me out of the side bedroom, he still smelled of blood. His uniform hadn't been taken off yet, and the cold golden tassels brushed against my skin, making me shiver. His voice was equally cold. "You sent that Omega to my bed?" I was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Yes." Marco let out a light laugh, but there was little warmth in his eyes. He reached out, gripping my chin and lifting my face. The coarse white glove scraped painfully against my skin. "You have no right to make decisions for me, Damon. Remember your place." The salty, glacial scent filled the bedroom, mingling with the damp smell of rain, like a storm was brewing. It happened to be Marco's rutting period today, and I, during his rut, had delivered another Omega to his bed. Marco's movements were rough. He forced my head into the pillow, and my hoarse cries were muffled in my throat. Without pheromones, I was most aware of how to use body language to calm an enraged Marco. I struggled to turn over, grunted softly, and wrapped my arms tightly around his neck, pressing my body against his. Marco tugged at my hair and kissed me fiercely, as if he wanted to swallow me whole. A sound came from the doorway. Squinting, I saw the pale-faced, marshmallow-scented Omega standing there. His face was ghostly pale, but an unnatural blush crept across his cheeks. Strands of sticky marshmallow clung to the glacial pheromones, like a silent invitation. Marco met his gaze, his hands pressing down on my body, which struggled under the sheets. Each thrust was harder than the last. Shame threatened to drown me, but I knew, it was deliberate. This was his punishment. Just before I passed out, Marco finally spoke. "Damon, anyone who deceives and mocks me will not have a good end." Marco's rut lasted a full week. When I finally regained consciousness, it was the afternoon of the 8th day. My throat was raw, and my legs shook as I went downstairs to get a glass of water. The light interface on my wrist vibrated, the communicator connected. I said nothing, and neither did the other person, as if waiting for me to speak. I counted silently in my mind, 10 seconds, ready to hang up. At the last second, they finally spoke. "That Omega is dead." My wrist shook, and the glass almost slipped from my hand. I quickly steadied myself and spoke evenly, "Madam, he died for you. You insisted on uniting the General and the Omega, but it seems your son's self-control far surpasses your husband's." A laugh came from the other side, as if my shameful words had nothing to do with her. The union of an Alpha and Omega is inevitable. Defying biological instincts is sheer foolishness. People should know their place. A plaything is just a plaything. In the end, Marco will marry an Omega of equal social standing. I hope you understand your role. In just 2 days, 2 people had said the same to me. But even without them saying it, I would never forget. I was one of the auction items Marco rescued from an underground auction house. After years of the Empire's expansion, the shadows hid filth and rot. It was nothing new. I had already prepared myself to fight to the death. But I was lucky, I met Marco. There were more than 130 illegal items being auctioned underground that night, more than 50 Omegas among them. The illegal goods were confiscated by the Empire, the Omegas were sent to the Omega Protection Association. In the end, only I was left, a regular beta. I heard Marco's lieutenant ask him, "General, how should we deal with this beta?" Hearing the footsteps coming closer, I strained to lift my head in the sliver of light spilling through the door and looked up at Marco. His boots stopped beside me, and I saw his eyes flick over the card with my auction details. I remembered how the auctioneer had introduced me. A beautiful beta, soft and delicate, and most importantly, he will never get pregnant. Durable. His gaze skimmed over me for a second before pulling away. He turned to leave. His voice was as cold as his eyes. "Send him to the police. Return him to his family." But I couldn't be sent back home. I'd been sold here by my own family. The moment the cuffs came off my wrists, I lunged forward and clung tightly to Marco's leg. I looked up at him, tears trembling at the edge of my eyes, ready to fall. "General, I don't have a family anymore. Please, let me stay with you. I'll do anything you ask, just let me stay." I knew exactly which angle made me look my most pitiful, the most endearing. But Marco only lowered his gaze, expressionless, looking at me like a clown in his own act. The rough fabric of his military pants rubbed painfully against my bare skin beneath the thin layer of gauze I wore. My smile stiffened, my fingers trembling as I clutched at his trouser leg, unable to keep up the act. Behind me, the lieutenant spoke, reaching out to pull me away. Enough, little beta. Thousands try tricks like this to get close to the general. Come on, I'll take you to the station. Just as the lieutenant's hand was about to touch my shoulder, Marco finally moved. He bent down, slapped the man's hand away, and, to everyone's astonishment, grabbed the crimson velvet cloth draped over a nearby glass display case and threw it over me. Before I could even lift my head to breathe, a sudden weightlessness hit me, and I gasped. Marco had scooped me up and was striding out with me in his arms. He threw me into his private airship. Take him back. The doors shut, and Marco didn't get on. But I knew then, I had succeeded. Later I learned Marco loathed Omegas. And the only reason I'd succeeded was simply because I happened to be a beta. People always believe what they see with their own eyes. Before this, I also thought no alpha could truly resist the bond between alpha and omega. But Marco's actions gave me more leverage. I thought, shameless and calculating, good. Hate them more, Marco. The more you hate Omegas, the longer I can stay by your side. But I also knew that cooperating with Marco's mother in that little test would anger him. So for half a month, Marco didn't come home. Every day I slept curled up under a thin blanket on the couch in the living room, dressed in very little. Finally, in the third week, Marco returned. I ran to him, thrilled, and without caring about the cold air around him, I leapt into his arms. Marco's hand slid under my thighs as he carried me inside. All day sleeping under surveillance. Are you trying to get my pity on purpose? I giggled, wrapping my arms around his neck, and kissed him. Only if you're willing to fall for it. No, next time. Do you hear me? I quickly nodded, obediently curling up against him. I tilted my head up to meet his gaze. You really hate Omegas that much? Marco's hand rested on my waist, his voice cool. Yeah, I hate them. I could barely hold back my smile, teasing him. What if I turned into an Omega? Would you throw me out too? Marco lowered his eyes to me for a moment, then let out a quiet laugh. Hard to tell if it was a joke. Who knows? His fingers slid to the back of my neck, slowly rubbing it. So, Damon, be good. Never deceive me. I never thought my words would become a curse. Staring at the 2 lines on the test stick, I felt numb. When I snapped back to myself, I quickly pulled out my wrist interface and searched. Can betas get pregnant? All the answers said no. I let out a breath of relief. Of course, beta reproductive systems have long since atrophied. How could I possibly be pregnant? This test stick had to be wrong. I wrapped the stick tightly in tissues, stuffed it deep inside a plastic bag, tied it shut, and buried it at the very bottom of the trash. Marco absolutely couldn't see it. Even if it was fake, he mustn't see it. But the signs began leaking through in other ways, enough to catch Marco's attention. Once again, I left the table mid-meal and ran to the bathroom to retch. Straightening up in disarray, I saw Marco standing at the door. I spoke before he could, forcing a mild smile. It's nothing. Just the heat lately, my stomach's off. Get checked, he said. I wanted to say something more, but the way Marco looked at me stopped me cold. In truth, I was only his caged canary. No matter how favored, I should know my place. And as a beta, I shouldn't have to worry about any of this. But the 1 in a million chance had happened to me. Secondary differentiation. The doctor handed me the test report confirming my secondary differentiation and pregnancy, rattling off precautions. I didn't hear a word, only asked, Doctor, is there any way for an Omega to become a beta again? Before he could answer, I went on. I remember gland removal works. Can I have the gland removed? The doctor's expression turned serious. You just differentiated. You're carrying a child. Your glands are at their most fragile right now. Removing them now, unless you're trying to die, would be lethal. Call your alpha in. I'll explain to him. My voice shot up, almost a shout. No, don't tell him. Realizing I'd overreacted, I apologized, snatched the report from his hands, and rushed out. I was only grateful I hadn't gone to the Empire's military hospital. If I had, my report would have been in Marco's hands the next second. I closed my eyes, gripping the report tightly, and made a decision. I would hide this from Marco. Marco's message came out of nowhere. He said there was a business banquet tonight, and he was coming to pick me up. When I got on the airship, Marco's eyes flicked over me once, his gaze pausing on my bag. My whole body went stiff. He quickly looked away and asked, "How did it go?" I forced my smile to look natural. The doctor said it's just a seasonal stomach bug. Nothing serious. My pregnancy report was still sitting quietly inside my bag, just one thin layer of leather away, like a ticking time bomb. I was gambling that Marco wouldn't suspect anything, that he wouldn't care enough to ask. And I won. Marco didn't press the issue. At the banquet, Marco first introduced me around to a few people. When a group of men in uniform came over, he patted my waist. "Go find yourself something to eat." I obediently left, picked up a few pastries, and sat in a quiet corner. Across from me, a plate was set down. A beautiful Omega sat opposite. I've always heard the general's lover is a beta. Why bring an Omega tonight? There was a collar around his neck, carved with intricate patterns that made him look like a trapped songbird. At the end of the collar was a string of numbers. I squinted. 181002. The identification number of the Alliance's highest military commander. This collar was both a shackle and a warning. A warning to anyone coveting this Omega, a declaration of absolute ownership. Perhaps noticing my eyes linger on the collar, he smiled at me. "Beautiful, isn't it?" He tilted his head slightly, like an elegant swan showing off its feathers. His hand moved to his stomach. "I traded for it with this." For a moment I didn't understand. Then he leaned closer, eyes still bent in a fixed arc of a smile. "There used to be a little life here." I froze. His gaze shifted meaningfully to my stomach. I instinctively hunched forward, arms wrapping protectively over my abdomen, glaring at him. He retreated back to his seat and took a sip of wine. "I don't mean any harm. We're actually the same kind of person." Looks like the general still doesn't know. But paper can't cover fire. Don't get your hopes up too high, or you'll end up like me. This collar is a warning to outsiders, but also a surveillance tool. It monitors all my indicators, including pregnancy hormones, to make sure I'll never carry another child. My nails dug so deep into my palm that they broke skin, but I didn't even notice. Finally, I muttered, almost gasping for air. "What if?" He smiled again, this time with genuine mockery. "In this world, only a few people get to be lucky. Do you dare gamble?" I found Marco out on the balcony of the banquet hall. He was in uniform, his cape whipping in the evening wind. Someone stood beside him. In the dim light, I recognized his lieutenant. "Have you thought it through?" Marco asked calmly. The lieutenant nodded. Marco's face was unreadable, as cold and severe as ever. "Giving up your career for an Omega, you're a fool. A soldier shouldn't have a weak point." The lieutenant asked quietly, "What if it's your spouse who's pregnant?" Marco fell silent for a while before answering. "He's a beta. He'll never, and should never, have a child." The night air was colder. The wind cut into my skin like ice. I stepped back, retreating inside. I rubbed my arms hard, but the chill wouldn't leave. Marco's words echoed in my mind. I suddenly realized that in Marco's heart, I didn't even have the possibility of being pregnant, because Damon was always a beta, and could only be a beta. A beautiful but ordinary, safe, non-pregnant beta. It was a fact, an unbreakable truth. I clenched my bag. The pregnancy report inside rustled sharply, like a blade, reminding me, maybe it was time to leave. The Omega wasn't surprised when I returned. "I thought you'd need more time to decide." He slipped the woman's cigarette he'd just taken out back into its case. I was silent for a while before asking, "Will you help me?" He smiled. "Of course." I stared at him. "If you're not happy, you don't have to smile." The Omega blinked, then slowly let the smile fade. On his delicate face, a hint of coldness appeared instead. "All these years, you're only the second person to ever say that to me." He handed me a ticket. "1 week from now, the military will conduct field exercises. That's your best chance." I tucked the ticket away. "What about you?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I'll probably end up tearing each other apart with him until one of us dies." Finally, he reached out and touched my stomach. "If someday I can't take it anymore and come to you, make sure the little one knows me as a godmother." 3 years later, I was climbing the narrow stairs of a shabby building, carrying groceries up to the 5th floor. As I opened the door, a tiny figure launched at me, hugging my leg. "Papa, hungry." I freed one hand to ruffle his hair, then slid a toy car across the floor to distract him. "Go play for a bit, sweetheart. Papa will cook soon." After putting the groceries in the kitchen, I answered a call on my communicator. "Xiaoyu, tomorrow's a very important summit. We're receiving a high-profile guest from the central system. Make sure you arrive early and be fully prepared." My supervisor's voice was unusually tense. I was busy and just agreed absent-mindedly. I didn't think too much about who the big guest was. What kind of person could make my boss so nervous? So the next day, when I saw the man being escorted into the summit hall, draped in the Empire's general's uniform, epaulets gleaming, I went completely blank. My blood seemed to freeze. Marco. He was even more severe than 3 years ago. The aura around him was like a glacier made solid, silencing the bustling crowd without a word. He walked in with long strides, eyes straight ahead, as if everything around him was irrelevant. This was the farthest star system from Blue Star, backward and poor. I had hidden here for 3 years. I never thought we would meet again like this. My heart pounded like a drum. I forced myself to lower my head, blending in with the staff, hoping he wouldn't notice me. It had only been 3 years, yet it felt like a lifetime. Someone like him had surely forgotten all about the nuisance who left without a word. I was silently praying when a piercing alarm ripped through the hall. Emergency! Space pirates attack! Repeat, space pirates attack! The lights cut out. The hall plunged into darkness and chaos. People screamed and shoved. I stumbled, nearly falling, straight into a hard, familiar chest. A blast of cold, pure, glacial pheromones wrapped around me, bringing with them an undeniable, instinctive force of calm that froze me in place. Marco. In the dark, his hand found my arm with unerring precision. His grip wasn't harsh, but I couldn't break free. His voice sounded above me, low and steady, cutting through the chaos. Stay calm. Move toward the emergency exit. No one noticed our brief contact in the confusion, but I could feel his eyes, tangible, on the back of my neck, on the faint lily scent of my pheromones leaking from tension. Outside, the roar of fighter ships and explosions drew closer. The building itself vibrated. My heart clenched. Little treasure. My rented place was too close to here. Terror crushed me. I tried to wrench free, my voice shaking. Let me go. My child's still at home. Instead of letting go, his grip tightened, holding me firmly against his side. In the noise and darkness, his voice reached me clearly, carrying a calm that seemed to know everything, and beneath it, a faintly suppressed anger. Damon, 3 years apart, and you've certainly surprised me. 10. I felt like I had fallen into an ice pit, my whole body turning cold. You've got the wrong person. I struggled helplessly, my voice pitching higher from panic. Wrong person. Marco let out a low laugh. There wasn't a hint of warmth in it, only faint mockery. His hand suddenly slid from behind and gripped my waist, making me shudder violently. Your body, your voice, even after 3 years, I'd still know. And as for the child, he paused. Amid another wave of explosions and people's screams, his voice cut like a blade. How long did you think you could hide it from me? He knew. The shock and the terror of being found out nearly suffocated me. His adjutant ran over through the chaos, shouting at Marco, General, the safe room is ready, please move immediately. No need. Marco's tone left no room for refusal. Deploy an elite squad at once. I'll send the coordinates. Make absolutely sure a child named Oscar is kept safe. He had named my address and my son's name with perfect precision. The adjutant froze for a moment, then snapped to attention. Yes, General. As for you, Marco finally released my arm. But in the darkness his eyes still pinned me like a spotlight. Come with me. Without another word, he took my wrist, pulled me with him through the panicked crowd under the escort of guards, and led me to a reinforced emergency shelter at the back of the venue. The door shut behind us, cutting off most of the noise. Inside, it was just the two of us. The cold glow of the emergency lights threw sharp edges across his face. He took off his heavy coat and tossed it aside. The crisp uniform underneath emphasized his broad shoulders and narrow waist, his presence almost overwhelming. Now we can talk. He turned fully to face me, eyes searching mine like a scanner. Tell me, why have you been hiding with my child in a place like this for 3 years? 11. I leaned against the icy metal wall, my fingertips trembling. Didn't you hate Omegas? Didn't you never want a child? My leaving was exactly what you wanted, wasn't it? Exactly what I wanted, Marco repeated, walking closer step by step until our breaths almost mingled. Damon, who told you could decide for me? His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the pressure of a gathering storm. I looked up at him defiantly. Isn't it true? In your eyes, isn't he just an unworthy weakness? A child born from a beta who turned into an omega, something shameful for an imperial general? Marco's pupils contracted. He suddenly braced a hand against the wall beside my ear, caging me under his shadow. His glacial pheromones pressed down on me like a weight, yet with a strange control that kept them from truly hurting me. Listen, he said, locking eyes with mine, each word deliberate. No matter what I thought, you should never have risked your own safety, or the child's. This planet is remote and underdeveloped. It's the perfect target for interstellar pirates. If I hadn't arrived in time, have you even imagined what could have happened to you and the boy? His reproach lashed across my heart like a whip. Yes, I had hidden for 3 years, terrified for 3 years, and in his eyes, was it all just stupid? What about you? I raised my head to meet his gaze, the frustration and fear I'd held in for 3 years finally erupting. You knew I was pregnant, yet you let me go. Where were you these 3 years? And now you think you can just show up and accuse me? Marco fell silent for a moment, the hand braced on the wall curling slightly. His eyes churned with something complicated, then he exhaled, so softly it was almost inaudible. Back then the Empire was about to go through a purge. Staying near me was the most dangerous place you could be. Countless eyes were watching, searching for my weak points. A partner who had suddenly differentiated and become pregnant would have been the biggest target of all. I also wanted to see what choice you'd make. But now it's clear, letting you go was the greatest mistake I ever made. Just then, a knock came at the door. The adjutant's voice filtered through. General, the squad has successfully secured the target child. He's safe and en route to the flagship. Marco answered briefly, but his gaze never left me. Hearing that Oscar was safe, the tension in me collapsed all at once. My legs went weak and I nearly slid to the floor. Marco's arm wrapped around my waist just in time, pulling me away from the cold wall. His grip wasn't exactly gentle, but it carried an undeniable steadiness. Now, he said, looking down at me, his voice low and resonant, we can finally settle the score for these 3 years. 11. I was half forced onto Marco's flagship, Winter's Edge. Inside, the starship was cold and efficient, filled with the scent of metal and energy fluid, so unlike the small, cozy life I'd known for the past 3 years. I was placed in a comfortable cabin, but the guards outside made it clear that I could not leave without Marco's orders. It was little better than house arrest. Before long, the cabin door slid open, and Marco stepped inside. He had shed the smoke-stained coat from earlier, wearing only a simple black uniform shirt that emphasized his tall, commanding figure. His presence alone carried a sharp authority. Oscar, 2 years and 10 months. Born at the Katara Civil Medical Center. Omega male, pheromone type, fresh grass after rain, currently rated sea level, developing normally, no major medical history. He recited the notes from the tablet as though briefing on military intelligence. Over the past 3 years, you've moved across 4 star systems, lived at 7 different addresses, and worked in 6 jobs, including data entry, restaurant service, and temporary conference staff. He lifted his gaze, eyes piercing mine. Records show your living standards barely reached sustenance level, medical resources were insufficient, and the child's vaccinations were incomplete. Damon, this is the life you chose. Each of his words pricked at my heart. I clutched my shirt, forcing myself to remain calm. At least I was free. Free? Marco's laugh was sharp, dismissive. He tossed the tablet onto the table, the sound crisp. In a remote system where interstellar pirates can strike at any moment, scraping by on meager wages, unable to secure even basic healthcare for a child, that's your idea of freedom? I had no reply. He was right. Today's fears still lingered in my chest. I tried to argue but found myself at a loss for words. Damon, his voice dropped low, carrying the weight of absolute authority, the game is over. You may continue to hate me, to blame me, but Oscar must return to his rightful place. He is the heir and deserves the best education, the finest protection, and the top-tier resources. You're taking him. I shot up, my heart hammering. I'm not taking him, Marco corrected, his gaze icy, almost cruel. He must return to where he belongs. And you? He paused, studying my face, emotions hidden yet layered. You are his biological father. That can't be changed. I expect you to return with him, in the capacity of his other parent. This wasn't a discussion. It was a decree. A calculated decision he deemed most reasonable. He may no longer reject Omegas or children outright like he did 3 years ago, but his elevated, controlling mindset hadn't changed. He would bring Oscar into his world, and my place was merely peripheral. I stared at his cold face, my heart freezing. 3 years had passed. He seemed different, yet unchanged. He had learned to accept responsibility but not respect feelings. Marco gave me no time to respond. He turned and left the cabin, leaving me alone to face this difficult choice. After some time, the cabin door opened again. A small figure barreled in like a cannonball and threw himself into my arms. Papa! Oscar's voice cracked, the day's events clearly frightening him. I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body, my heart melting. Behind him, Marco stood at the door. His expression was unreadable, but the cold, rigid aura around him softened ever so slightly. Oscar sniffled a bit before calming down. He turned his curious eyes toward the imposing alpha at the doorway. Marco looked at him too. Father and son locked eyes from a few steps apart, silently assessing each other. After a while, Marco stepped forward. He didn't kneel, just tilted his gaze downward toward Oscar. Then, unexpectedly, he took a small, simply shaped starship model made of a dark, muted metal from his uniform pocket and offered it to Oscar. The model wasn't polished or delicate, showing traces of handcrafting and age. Oscar blinked, still teary-eyed, glancing between the model and Marco, hesitating. Take it. Marco's voice was flat but slightly less rigid than before. Oscar tentatively reached out and took the small model, examining it with curiosity. Thanks, Daddy. Oscar's voice was soft, hesitant, testing the name. Perhaps the soldiers or medical staff who had escorted him taught him that. Marco's body froze imperceptibly. He studied Oscar's clear black eyes, so much like his own, and remained silent for several seconds. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. A single syllable, yet it seemed to gently crack a small gap in his glacial defenses. He said no more, didn't attempt to hold Oscar, and only glanced at us once before leaving the cabin. That night, I lay in bed holding Oscar, restless. Marco's attitude suggested a turning point. He seemed willing to accept Oscar, but this didn't mean he had accepted me or softened his domineering nature. During the rest of the voyage, Marco remained busy, but he made a point to appear in the cabin daily. Sometimes he brought carefully prepared food or toys suitable for a toddler. Sometimes he just stood at the door, watching me play puzzles with Oscar. Once, Oscar bumped his head on the table while playing with the Starship model, almost crying. Marco entered at that moment, said nothing, but awkwardly rubbed Oscar's forehead with hands accustomed to weapons. His movements were stiff, yet somehow soothing. He remained taciturn, sparing with words. Yet these subtle, seemingly incidental gestures stirred ripples of unease and hope within me. On the eve of the fleet's final jump toward Blue Star's gravity well, Marco entered my cabin again. This time, he didn't stay at the door. He walked in and sat in the chair across from me. "Have you made a decision?" he asked directly. I met his gaze, but instead of answering, I returned a question. "Marco, to you, what are Oscar and I? A responsibility to be managed, or something else?" It was the first time I asked him so directly. Marco seemed caught off guard. He was silent, his eyes scanning the sleeping Oscar on the bed before returning to me. The soft cabin lights cast faint shadows across his rigid features. "Damon," he spoke slowly, his voice low and steady, "my life is built on order, rules, and control. I despise anything outside my control, including uncontrolled emotions." He paused, weighing his words. "Your arrival, and everything that followed, exceeded my initial expectations and plans. Your departure only proved my control wasn't infallible." His honesty surprised me. "These past 3 years," he continued, gaze intense, "I never stopped searching for you. But I did so in a more discreet manner. I told myself it was to ensure the safety of the bloodline. But perhaps," he frowned slightly, clearly uncomfortable with this self-examination. "Not entirely." He looked at me with unprecedented focus and seriousness. "The word responsibility may not be entirely accurate, but it is the foundation. On that basis," he hesitated, struggling for the right expression, "you are an exception. You are the only anomaly in my life allowed to exist, one that cannot be fully defined by rules." He stood and walked to the bed, gazing at Oscar for a moment, then turned to face me. "When we return to Blue Star, I will officially register your existence with the Empire. Oscar is my legitimate heir. And you, Damon," he said, tone solemn, "are my only lawful partner. I hope this time, you will stay willingly." 13. I didn't answer immediately. Marco gave me time, and he gave me space. After Winter's Edge arrived at Blue Star, we were placed in his heavily guarded mid-mountain estate. I stayed in a guest room next to the master bedroom, separated from him by a sitting area. He was still busy, leaving early and returning late, so our encounters were rare. He no longer mentioned registering us, as if our conversation on the ship had been merely a preliminary intention. This unresolved tension made me examine my own feelings even more clearly, until my heat arrived unexpectedly early. Perhaps it was the change of environment, or the buildup of emotions, but a sudden, overwhelming wave of desire struck me in the middle of the night. My lily-of-the-valley pheromones spilled uncontrollably, filling the quiet mansion with a sweet, heady scent. I curled up on the guest room bed, my body burning, my mind hazy. Only a shred of reason kept me biting my lip, preventing myself from making shameful sounds. The door opened silently. Marco stood there, carrying the chill of the night, his uniform crisp. It was clear he had been drawn by my pheromones. His deep eyes cut through the darkness, landing on my disheveled form. The strong glacier pheromones flowed from him, forceful and cold, instinctively attempting to suppress, soothe, or even claim. I closed my eyes, expecting him to act on that instinct. I had heard too many stories of alphas losing control when an omega is in heat, but the expected touch never came. I heard him inhale deeply, then a restrained step back. "Where's the suppressant?" His voice was hoarse, as if holding something back, yet remarkably calm in tone. I froze, managing to weakly point to the nightstand. He walked over briskly, efficiently retrieved the suppressant, and returned to the bed. He didn't touch me directly, instead placing the suppressant within reach. "Need help?" His voice was still tense. I shook my head and used my trembling hands to inject it myself. The cold liquid spread through my veins, gradually subduing the surging desire. Throughout, he remained a few steps away, silent, like a taut glacier. His pheromones lingered in the room, soothing, yet strictly controlled so as not to trigger further loss of control. He didn't take advantage, didn't mark me using his physiological advantage, and even turned his head slightly while I injected myself to avoid overstimulation. When I finally recovered, leaning weakly against the headboard, he looked at me again, eyes complex. Why? My voice was weak, emotions tangled. Relief coursed through me, but it was tinged with a subtle bitterness. AO attraction is natural, instinctive. My compatibility with Marco wasn't low, yet he seemed to want nothing from me. Perhaps he truly despised Omegas. Marco's psychological dislike of Omegas seemed enough to override his alpha instincts. Damon, he interrupted, his usual calm returning, though tinged with something hard to describe. I want your willing return, not attachment driven by instinct. He walked to the window, back to me, gazing at the night sky. His shoulders remained sharp, rigid. Marking an Omega in heat, unconscious of their own choices, is an insult to me, and a disrespect to you. He paused. I admit I want you, but not like this. I looked at his tall, yet at that moment, seemingly lonely figure. My heart felt a gentle strike. He did have desire, but chose to place my will above his instincts. Marco, I whispered. He turned. Come, give me a temporary mark. He hadn't expected the request, but quickly understood. He knelt on one knee on the bed, hand on the back of my head, fangs lightly pressing against my gland. Glacier pheromones flowed slowly, the body immersed in a comfortable coolness. Watching Marco's eyes flush with the first hints of desire, I smiled and pushed him gently. That's enough. You can leave now. For the next few days, I kept summoning him like this, using him as a human suppressant. Marco, clever as he was, realized I was deliberately getting back at him. After the mark, he didn't leave immediately. I nestled against him, feeling the coolness through my body like a lazy cat. His hand slowly traced my waist. When he tried to slip under my clothes, I stopped him. You promised you wouldn't force me, you want me willing. I watched his face darken with frustration, powerless to act. The Empire's military command clearly felt the tension. Recently, the bases were shrouded in a gloomy atmosphere, all traced to the general's bad mood. His subordinates dared not breathe too loudly, fearing misfortune. Marco sat, hands clasped under his chin, brows furrowed, deep in thought. Guards at the door assumed he was considering state affairs and dared not slacken. After a while, I heard him activate the communicator, calling the former deputy. If your wife is angry, how do you usually calm her down? 14. When I returned home, Marco was planting the last lily of the valley. All the other greenery had been removed, replaced entirely with white lilies. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying the fragrance across the courtyard, brushing Marco's brow and eyes. Seeing me, he straightened. Do you like it? I sensed this wasn't his usual style and asked, where did you learn this? Marco's face was serious. My deputy said I needed to give you flowers. I guess the original instruction had been a bouquet of flowers. Instead, Marco uprooted the whole yard and planted a courtyard of lilies. I almost laughed, but seeing the earnestness on his face, I couldn't. I didn't answer him. Instead, I asked softly, Marco, can I trust you? He came over, lifted the back of my hand, and placed a light kiss on it. The palm felt cold. Opening it, I saw a silver dog tag resting there. Every Imperial soldier has a tag, symbolizing loyalty, duty, mission, life itself until death. This is the highest level of loyalty I can give you. The tag's edges were sharp, precise. I smiled. Then, Marco, your household will have 2 pampered Omegas from now on.